Welcome back to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. I'm really happy to have my friend Chuck Adams with me. Chuck's company is Coeptis, and he's on the buy side of mergers and acquisitions for consulting for aviation aerospace. He's doing a lot of work out there, and thanks for coming on, Chuck.
It's an absolute pleasure to be on, Craig. Thanks for having me.
So what's happening out in Boise?
Boise, oh man, it's hot and dry, like anything in a high desert in the Rocky Mountains. But it's good. I'm actually outside right now because it's really nice, which is a good change. So
there you go. Well, I thought Boise this time of year was like the place to be.
Well, I mean, it depends what you mean by the place to be for this time of year. But no, it does get blistering hot. You know, I spent summers in college working out in the sun and everything. And the other day it was 105. And, so I mean, it's no Phoenix or anything, right? But it gets very hot and very dry, including
but it's a dry heat.
It's a dry heat. I remember in Arizona, that shirt, right? It's a dry heat. Yeah. But this morning, actually, it's pretty humid. So it's going to get pretty hot and humid today.
So cool. Well, let's change the focus. When you and I met last in person, you were out working with a major investment bank or private equity group, and you were helping them with some acquisition targets. What's going on in the M&A world? What are you seeing on the buy side of M&A right now in aerospace and defense?
Yeah, it's very interesting. There are a lot of people that are eager, obviously, to find some good deals. We definitely seen that. And actually about 20, 30 minutes ago, I got off the phone with another private equity fund, that's doing the same thing. They're poised to really want to dig into, the technical stuff like aerospace and defense. We've seen some deals go out there, right? Whether it's PE or strategic investors, but there's also a little bit of a kind of a neutrality. It's not like it's taking off like, a bat out of hell, but at the same time, it's not super slow either. It's kind of just, that's what I've seen, at least on my end. But hopefully, yeah, people are kind of, I think with the way the economy is, right, Craig, that people are kind of going, well, do we want to buy? Is there going to be a big recession? We don't know. So there's a little bit of uncertainty there, but there's still some good solid deals going on. For
those who are waiting, so let's back up a little bit.
Sure.
Talk about your typical client.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So a little bit about us, when we started, there is three big areas that we focus on, which we obviously do, enterprise performance, ops excellence. And right now, even I have a design for excellence consulting gig I'm doing right now, helping a top 5 defense contractor do that. We also have worked with technology, but more importantly, where we've really grown is kind of the PE side a little bit. And so where we've really started to play, we've noticed a big need is, private equity firms, they want to go participate in what we call these industrial markets and transportation, right? So, we obviously have cut our teeth in aerospace and defense. We've done rail, a little bit of automotive, RV, kind of those big complex products that move people. And a lot of times people want to get in on it. And there's some really good companies out there in these spaces, but finding that or navigating that can be a little tricky, right? Especially aerospace. I mean, as you know, right? Aerospace is just big behemoth. Where do you start, right? That so many different companies on manufacturing and MRO that serve it. And so where we've really cut our teeth in that space is really helping find a lot of those deals and help them, kind of even before IOI and really digging in and looking at some potential deals of, well, where do you want to go and what kind of deals are you looking for? And so that's where we've really cut our teeth. So.
Yeah, I mean, you were taking a very, what I was impressed with when we met was you were taking a very methodical approach to it. You were looking at, okay, who's got certifications for certain manufacturers, or who's got certifications for certain parts. And then you had really knocked it down to a lot of different, to a lot of really small envelopes as to, here are companies that are doing this. Here are buyers that would probably have some interest in this. And here's, here's how to attack the market. Is that what, talk about your process a little bit.
Yeah. And I know we had talked about this a little previously. One of the things, because this is like we looked at, is because this is such a big market, right? There's so many little niches and so many different, ways to cut it, right? Details, flavors. And one of the things we noticed as we were working with clients is like, sometimes you're not looking for just, oh, give me an MRO company, right? It's no. I need somebody with this license that does accessories on, I don't know, 737s, right? Or maybe it's military. I need somebody that's certified and has a good contract that does F-15 landing gears. I'm just making something up there, but being able to cut into that and find those nitpicky details of these companies has been really important, we've noticed. And so what we've done, and with our approach, is really to not only look at the firm and just say, okay, here's their website or whatnot, and oh, they have this, this FAA repair station licenses, but okay, well, what are they actually doing, right? Are they repairing parts on this? Oh, okay, well, they do accessories here, but do they do it on this other frame? We really try to dig into the nit and gritty, and we kind of have a standard process when we're looking at a firm that's obviously always getting better. We're very, lean oriented, right? We always want to get better quality, right? But yeah, digging into those finer points that people sometimes maybe miss or it's not apparent. And I wouldn't say too much detail, but enough to really get a feeling of where they're really playing. So we dig into those details, and we actually have that proprietary database we've been building because we want to keep track of all of it. So, yeah.
So you're talking about a little bit about, the deals people are sitting on, a little bit of a holding pattern right now. Some stuff's happening. Obviously economic environment moving forward is foggy. Are people just sitting on the sidelines thinking, hey, maybe I can get a better deal in a year? Or are they just looking at the overall outlook of the industry and thinking, maybe now's not the right time?
In my experience, right, everybody has a different one. I think a lot of them, there's really two people, right? I don't find that the first one being very pessimistic about the market overall. With the way that traveling, I mean, look at the shortages, right, of planes and people trying to get seats and travel, right, and increasing prices. I don't think too many people are being super pessimistic about the market, right? There's been inflation and things like that, and I think people will continue to travel even if there's some kind of recession, which I won't, get into what's going on there. But on the other hand, I think with that in mind, I think it's the second side of it where, okay, well, if we're going to play here, they're kind of looking what's happening out in the next 6 months to a year when it comes to contracts, and what is the DoD going to do? And, I think that's what they're really looking for, is just finding that right deal where you get that long-term agreement, or, kind of the fear of missing out, we call it, typical millennial like me, right? FOMO. And I think that's a little bit more of what I find is just like, well, what if something better comes along? But at the same time, too, though, the third category is people are obviously like, give me all the teasers and give me everything that you can find, right? So I wouldn't say, though, to summarize, that people are too bearish. I just find that people are just like, well, there's a lot of good deals out there. Go find them. Yeah, they're just cautious. They just want to find the right deal, which totally makes sense, right? That's any time you do any kind of acquisition. So
a year or two ago, multiples were going crazy. Sellers were really, in love with, they were in love with their companies. They were throwing some gum on the wall. People were chasing it at big multiples. Have we seen a compression of those multiples now?
I think it's kind of a dip, and now we're coming out a little bit, is what I've seen. And obviously, I'll defer to the investment bankers. Like Bill Alderman comes on, good group of folks over there. But there was a lot of frenzy, I think, back in the 2018-19 timeframe, right? And then COVID hit, and things didn't look so good, right? With nobody flying, and EBITDA multiples at that time definitely started compressing. And I think the report was around between 5 and 10 was kind of where we were at, right, during COVID. But now things are slowly coming out. I'm hearing of 10 to 15 again, kind of up in that range. But obviously it depends on the company and the size, et cetera. But so I think they're starting to go up again now that things are starting to turn a little bit. But again, it's kind of like, well, let's see. Some owners might hold back and go, well, let's see how high it'll go, right? So, but I feel like owners are feeling like owner operators, of these small companies are feeling a little bit better about selling now. But some are still cautious. We'll see.
So who's selling right now? Talk about the average, what's a seller look like in today's market?
Sure. Beyond just the typical, PE needs to get out of a deal because they got LPs to pay back and investors. What we're noticing, and this isn't just aerospace and defense, I'm noticing across many industries, right? We had talked about this before, there's a lot of baby boomers and stuff, a lot of these owner operator businesses out there, right? That, they're hitting their retirement years and they want to get out of these companies or get some equity out, right? And be rewarded for their hard work. And so more and more, as we've been searching around, we're finding a lot of those companies that fit that profile where you have these, 50, 60, usually around early to mid 60s, they're about ready to think about like, well, I'm ready to retire, or maybe they want to get some of that equity out and stay on for a couple more years, right? And so we've seen a lot of that, especially in something like aerospace, because aerospace kind of has that profile, right? Where you have a lot of those that are looking to retire, those baby boomers, right? And there's a lot of those businesses out there dotted all over the place, not just, in one spot or one industry. I mean, we're finding owner and operators and all sorts of little niches in MRO and manufacturing, just all over the place, especially MRO. You see it a lot.
So from an MRO standpoint, these component MROs that are, they're selling, maybe they've got some LTAs into, the airlines or some of the OEMs, what are they, $5-10 million? Are they $5-10 million, $1 million companies, more or less?
Yeah.
Doing $2-3 million, $2-3 million in EBITDA.
Yeah. I would definitely say that. Most of these companies that we've been screening and kind of looking at appear to be about that size. They're usually around the 5 million mark. You'll see some upwards of 10 million, but a lot of these companies are breaking $1 million in revenue. Some of them are on 5, but you're not, and if you see anything past 10 and you have an owner and operator, that's surprising. You see it, but it's rare. You know what I mean? It's uncommon, right? You're not going to see that often, but yeah, I would say between 1 and 10, when we've been searching, we find a lot of diamonds out there, right? Just these owners and operators. They got these, most of them, I would say probably 40 or 50% of them are these small military MROs, right? They got these LTAs or this little niche, right? That they do that, right? Or, especially on legacy aircraft like the C-130s and the F-16s and stuff. I mean, beyond what the US is flying, a lot of foreign countries are flying these. And so there's obviously that big need out there for the next couple decades of those aircraft. And so we find owner and operators that are picking and choosing and specializing kind of an MRO of these little niche areas of those kind of aircraft. And
when I was flying E2s back in the early 90s, we learned that there was one supplier of, one radar box. If it burned out, it was $1 million to fix it.
Yeah.
Because there was one supplier who knew how to fix the box. Yeah. It was kind of a legacy system at that time. So they're not going to go find additional suppliers, but it was really amazing how these people start, it's almost garage type businesses.
Yeah.
Especially in the DoD, and obviously TransDigm's been out there going crazy, picking up a lot of these guys.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And then I know Standard Aero had picked up somebody back in May. But yeah, a lot of the strategic investors have been moving forward too.
Well, so Standard Aero they picked up Jet Parts Engineering down.
I think that's what it was.
Florida, and then they picked up another company, EB Airfoils.
EB Airfoils, yeah. I think they said that they were going to consummate a deal on that. Which, as I joked with you not too long ago, I wasn't surprised, with kind of the things that EB Airfoils works on. So. No, but
that's been Standard Aero. Standard Aero has been going after a lot of. They picked up one of my former clients over in Ireland, on a turbine repair, and so they, hey, look, we're gonna go crazy on turbine repairs, and I guess compete against the OEMs or certainly partner with them.
Yeah, exactly, and I'm not surprised, right? Because even with the PE firms that we've been working with too, it's like, hey. There's, of course, people say, oh, we'll do an CFM56 engine overhaul. And, you got those, players right out there in the MRO. I mean, the problem with that is sometimes it's very saturated, right? But what about those industries or these areas in MRO that are not as well picked, right? That are very fragmented, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's a lot of areas out there, and look at Standard Aero. I kind of see what they've been doing, looking at a lot of the turbine stuff, but a lot of the smallers, right? The turboprops or the small military, right? I think they have a facility in San Antonio that works on that a lot. And it makes sense what they're doing with who they've been acquiring. A lot of those small engines, that's a lot more fragmented out there versus, a GE90, right? I mean, there's very few people that can handle an make an autoclave that
find
big,
a test cell. Go build a test cell for GE90, right? And that's
yeah. Good luck with that.
CFM. Good luck with that investment.
Exactly.
So how is this changing? So how is this changing from what you're seeing? How are we changing the dynamic of the industry? 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more fragmented, a lot of small shops. They were all kind of competing for, airline, OEM, DoD business. You used to hear about GE doing their ballroom bidding processes where they just brought everybody into a ballroom.
Yeah. Hoteling, they call it now. Yeah. Before I left. Yeah.
Give us your lowest, give us your best price and move on.
Yeah.
And we'll call you next Tuesday. How's the industry changing?
That's a good question. Like I said, I think the awareness of it's very interesting from what I've seen in my limited opinion, because on one end, like in the US, there is a lot of pickup happening. Like I said, we talked about Standard Aero, right? Where people are identifying those fragmented markets. And we've seen this too, obviously, in the work that we've been doing. Mm-hmm. As you research companies, you kind of go, oh, well, this sector's kind of, or this part of the plane is really fragmented in MRO, right? And so we're starting to see a lot of those fragments, but people are kind of obviously at the same time seeing, I see this sector, whether it's a flight controls or air conditioning or whatever on the aircraft, right? And saying, hey, there's really not a big player that plays in that space, and it's a big area. Let's go put together something. So we're seeing a lot of that, coming and changing over the next few years for sure. But at the same time, when we look outside the United States, I was talking with some good friends of mine. I think what's really interesting is what's happening outside the United States, especially in emerging markets, like things like India and Southeast Asia, right? Mm-hmm. Despite with what's happening in COVID, there's just huge explosion, right, of population in the middle class. I mean, China is a good example over the last 10 years, right? And so lots and lots of people are flying in order to supply those parts and also service them via MRO. A lot of small shops are starting to show up there. And you got people like India that are starting to roll back a lot of their regulations and trying to make it more competitive. Mm-hmm. So you're going to see a lot of new entrants, I think, over the next 10 years in those emerging markets as well. And like I said, I talked to them and they're like, oh man, they make this LEAP part for people, when they assemble it, CFM assembles it in France, right? Because Europe, I feel like, is a little more hands off, right? When it comes to sourcing, they okay, I'll go to India, right? And you find some really good companies that are making parts, for example, in manufacturing for some really, really good, top of the line engine, the CFMs and stuff, and people just don't even know they exist. And so give it time. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And I don't think the world is a zero sum game. I think there's a piece for everybody. Right. So
what are you saying? Some more, you're going to see some more unique manufacturing starting up in India, some more unique manufacturing starting up in Delhi, or I'm not in Delhi, in China.
Yeah, I mean, well, China is a little bit more mature, right? But China, obviously, we won't go too deep into that, has kind of an agenda, right? With the Communist Party and stuff,
that becomes a question now, is the tech transfer and stuff like that.
But there are people like the Indias and Malaysia, I know, is growing in MRO sector. You're going to have this over time, this middle class just exploding in these areas, right? Especially, and starting to really fly a lot more. I mean, we're already starting to see it. And so not only just manufacturing, which is kind of a diamond in the rough thing, because manufacturing it's not tracked the same way, right, as MRO. MRO, you got your licenses, you got to get your A&Ps, even if it's a, US worker, there's a paper trail, right? Mm-hmm. With manufacturing, it's a little more OEM controlled, right? And so as long as the OEM, right, is certifying these people, they're like, okay, you can go get AS 9100, right? But
are we going to see some OEM more licensing agreements globally? do you think?
We've already started to see it. I would think so, right? Because think about, obviously the OEMs have started thinking ahead about this. When CFM started selling the LEAP, right, you're starting to see a lot of, for example, a lot of licensing agreements and maintenance agreements, out of China and out of Southeast Asia, right? Because sure, they're selling all these LEAPs and stuff throughout the Southeast too, but somebody's got to service them. And instead of trying to build your own facilities, right, that we know how capital intensive it is going to be, well, just come up with a partner, right? And we've seen that on LEAP quite a bit. And I think you'll see it too on a lot of the wide body engines. That's a little bit trickier, but wide body engines like the G90, the problem with those is they're just so massive. And so if you can get the facilities to be able to do them right, and you have something that big, they're going to want to talk to you, right? Same thing with Pratt or whoever has those large engines all over the place. So, because they're expensive to ship. I mean, look at logistics, right? It's insane. So
here it goes back to your buyer. Let me go back to the buyer question. So let's talk about something different. So is it a lot of the big OEMs now looking to buy these little suppliers and bring some of that stuff in-house, or is it all going to be private equity, Carlyle, AE Industrial Partners, AEA Capital, New State Capital, a lot of these smaller guys out there, just looking to own the industry for as long as they possibly can? Or is there a whole new category of Standard Aero and TransDigm on the rise?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Honestly, if we take a look at the OEMs, for example, right? I mean, the truth is they got so much capital tied up just in manufacturing, let alone MRO. I mean, the engine, for example, engines, and obviously you could tell that's where I cut my teeth. I was at GE Aviation for a while. A lot of them, they got a lot of capital they got to deal with, and the Boeings and the Airbuses, et cetera. If they try to go after these small players, it's going to be really, really difficult to do that. I think they know that, right? You've seen Lockheed do the same with the hologram program is a good example where, you got these legacy parts, right? And sure, they could service them, on these C-130s and whatnot, but they kind of pulled back and said, you know what? I don't want to deal with the supply chain on this anymore. Let me license it out to very specific small shops, right? Remember going back to that niche part, and let's let them take care of it and be competitive in that. So if I had to kind of make a guess kind of where I'm thinking it's going, I think it's going to be the latter. There's going to be a lot of these markets that OEMs really don't want to try to go buy up because they don't have the capital, or they want to stay true to what they're really good at. But then you got the Standard Aeros and strategic investors and private equity. They're going to see a lot of opportunity, I think, in the coming decades to snatch up and service areas that the OEMs just really are not equipped to do or don't want to do. I think so.
Now the one thing, the one downside of that, and this is, if you're a supplier, no offense, Honeywell, but everybody hates you because your licensing fees are, it's hard to make money after they pay the licensing fees. It's hard to make money. And then, Boeing has obviously been out there going, well, hey, that's, you designed and engineered that part for our airplane, so we want a cut of every dollar on the aftermarket too. And that's been causing some friction as well. So obviously there's some sort of frenemy relationship. What are you seeing on the M&A on the buy side of that? Is that going to ease up, or is that going to get more tenuous, or is it going to just stay the same forever? And kind of like, Tom and Jerry, we're going to, cat and mouse game.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, putting my engineering cap on, right, being a recovering engineer, as I say, on the LEAP programs and stuff, I think it really depends on where in the industry you're playing, right? Because, if you think about like an aluminum bracket, right, PMAing that, right, or you're DRing around that is a little bit more easy, right, than trying to go. Well, remember Pratt when they tried to make rotating discs and stuff, right? That didn't end very well with them, right? It's a little bit more of a technical skill set. But at the same time, though, it's a very good question. What I've seen, at least as of recent, is most people like the proprietary relationships. So not necessarily on parts. That's a good question on parts. We haven't dug into that too much, but on the MRO side, a lot of private equity buyers, and it's more than one. I've talked to a couple. They really do like those proprietary deals, right? Because it's like, hey, I'm associated with a Boeing or an Airbus or a GE or whatnot, right? And so because of that and the way that a lot of the warranties, and the contracts are written, that's usually a good thing for whoever has that. It's on the receiving end of that. So people do look for those OEM certified type of relationships quite a bit. But on the other hand, I feel like the OEMs can only, especially on the new make parts, the spares, I think they're only going to push for so long, right? Before people say, screw it, right? And they're up in the air and it'll shake itself out one way or another in the long run.
Look more for PMA. We'll start developing PMA. We'll get the leasing companies happy with PMA in our engines, right? And somehow or another, that conversation will change.
Yeah, and we've seen that pushback too. When I was doing CFM and stuff. Oh, there's a bee. Sorry, one bad thing about outside. What was really interesting is during that time. This was 7 years ago. There was that big controversy around, well, if I have a CFM engine, and this is probably, it's something that Rolls and everybody else was paying attention to. If I'm putting PMA parts in there, what happens with the warranty, right? Or what happens
the value of the engine?
Yeah, exactly. And so they did come into an agreement where they I won't go into that too much but it definitely, the OEMs with that relationship had to take a step back and go, okay, well, I can't push too hard against non-PMA, right? Because if I do, it's going to create a lot of issues. And especially that's true in overseas countries, right? Because, if you're just only flying in China, right? Do you think China gives a hoot about, you know what I mean? There's
not an IP agreement out there that China has. Let's just call it there, but I won't get into I won't even start, but selling to China, what you're getting into. Let's change the subject. So so sellers are out there, they're starting to think about it. One of my clients just sold. I hope he's happy. I think he's happy. He should be happy. What do sellers need to be thinking about right now? And what do buyers need to be thinking about when they're approaching the deal? I know a lot of sellers are out there thinking, well, I want the strategic partner who's going to take my business to the next level. And obviously got earnouts or, walk away clauses, and then you got buyers out there. What are they thinking? Do they want the founder of the company to stick around a while? Do they want him or her to, just make a quick exit and beat feet? What's going on in the mindset of buyers and sellers?
Yeah. On the selling side, this is obviously timeless advice, and the investment bankers, they'll tell you the same thing, right? Well, first, I would say, what do you really want, right? Like you said, do you really want to stick around and, help a good, smooth transition over the next few years? Or are you just kind of like, I'm done, and walk away, right? What's that succession plan going to look like, right? And that's the first thing. And then the other thing is, really take a good look and a hard look at yourself objectively. Well, obviously I'm preaching to the choir about any business owner, right? I have two myself, but really look in the mirror and say, what do I really have when it comes to sales and when it comes to diversification of customers? And because I can tell you right now, a lot of the buyers, timeless advice, right, are looking at that very specifically of, what do you actually already have? Are you like a one-stop shop for just one customer and then they yank the contract and then that's it, right? Which for a lot of these owner operators, that happens sometimes. We've seen all they do is one thing, and I'm like, risky, right?
Yep.
And more importantly, the third thing is growth. Okay, well, be thinking about, where are you really going? We've consulted on this too in the past, and not for people necessarily selling a company, but you have this IP or you have this area that you're looking at. What's next, right? Like, what are you noticing, and where do you think you can really grow, and see what that 5 to 10 year vision is going to be? Because for a fact, right, that the buy side is going to be asking that same exact question, right? Which then leads to the buy side. The first thing I say is, I think of the Notebook, the scene where he says, what do you want? Right. I say that very, very clearly. Like, okay, what do you really want? And when we go through our, our engagements, usually they're a few weeks at a time. Sometimes they're a month or two.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very iterative process, because when you're searching for something, it isn't like nice and clean, like a nice waterfall project. It's very dirty. You're going to get new bits of information and new things come your way daily.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so as you're going through all that, really reevaluate, like, what do you really want? What really do you want in your investment? And what are you really looking for? And the second thing I would recommend too, and again, timeless advice, but these companies are these owners' babies, especially, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was joking with somebody the other day. I said, the thing about consulting and all this private equity stuff is we got to keep remembering we are in a people business, whether we like it or not. Yeah. And you're dealing with humans here that have put their blood, sweat, and tears into these businesses, right?
Yeah.
And so obviously you got to be very open and honest with them about what you're looking for, but at the same time, really hear them out and what they have to say. Because, they're, even if they're getting a big paycheck out of it in the end, a big walk away exit, that's their baby. They grew it from nothing. I mean, I've talked to a couple people like, oh yeah, I started this in my garage 20 years ago. Right. These
Right.
A&Ps,
absolutely. Yeah, man.
Yeah. Sometimes these, like I was talking with a colleague, right? I also heard from our colleague, Rob, he made it very clear, like, I don't want to be this Ivy League, private equity suit guy that walks in and be like, here, let me throw a whole bunch of money at you and now get out. Right.
Yeah.
No. Right. A lot of these are owner operators, especially in aerospace and defense, that this is their baby. So remember that when you're talking with them and trying to cut them a deal. And
right.
I know I
just helped, private, I just placed the CEO of a private equity company, and they were in the diligence process when they approached me, and placed the CEO and the CFO, and it became a very personal, you really understand, it's a very personal transaction between them. And eventually, obviously the numbers got to make sense. But as I tell people in any, it's like nobody wants to hear their baby's ugly, and that's, that's ultimately what it comes down to is, in business, I tell clients and all the time, nobody wants to hear their baby's ugly, or worse yet, I love it when executives go to companies, they're being approached by a company to go, turn around a division or something like that. And they're like, well, yeah, I'm going to tell them, this is wrong or that's wrong. You're like, time out, man. Be a little bit, be cautious. Be cautious in that approach.
Yeah, it's in our other consulting projects too. I think about that. I've had to, even just recently, a couple of days ago, I was given he's this big head of engineering, and I was just kind of like prodding him, like, hey, listen, we have a good relationship, right? But here we have production over here just complaining, right? They're not getting enough engineering engagement. You're the colonel, you know what to do, right? And that tough love, but that polite love, right? And nobody likes, like you said, nobody likes having their baby called ugly, right? Right. But as a seller, right, and even as a business owner myself, I have to look in the mirror too. It's one of those, each side needs to be humble, right, and be like, well, my business can't be everything, and there's holes, whether it's in my ops or my finances or whatever, and be okay with that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I got approached too. I got approached recently, and it's like, whoa, and the question becomes, okay, explain it. What's in it for me? And ultimately, you have to have that, that dynamic. I know what's in it for you, but what's in it for me, type of deal. So
yeah, I feel like it's Socratic, right? You got to kind of, well, what do you think about this, and kind of walk them into the solution. That can be helpful with some people, but yeah, I get it.
And I think in aviation, it's a little bit different, where you do have these, it's less than tech, where you have, the tech world, you have people that build businesses, they become serial entrepreneurs. They build a business and then they flip it off pretty quickly. It's software, some sort of computer device or whatever, and they understand the game it's going to be very quick, and they really don't have an emotional attachment to it that much. But when you come to a person in aviation who's grown their business over 30 years, then they're with, it's a different type of conversation.
Yeah. Aviation. I have a construction company, same thing, right? Working with a lot of subcontractors. That's all they've done their whole life. A lot of them, Props off to the concrete people. I got to give them that, man. I know that's not aviation, but man, somebody's done concrete when you shake their hand and it feels like you're, shaking a rock.
There's a guy three doors up from me in my office who sold his concrete company for $120 million. I'm like, I want to be your friend, but did a good job. It was family-owned business. It was a family-owned business. They did a great job growing it, but it's once again, it's all good. So
yeah, this ain't tech for sure. Agreed.
No, I hear you. Hey, Chuck, how do people get a hold of you? Great conversation today. How do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, sure. So my phone's always open, 253-720-9058. But also you can visit our website at www.coeptiscg.com or an email, just contact@coeptiscg.com.
And Coeptis is spelled Coeptis.
Yes, that's correct. Thanks for
Latin for, it's a Latin word for what?
Like undertakings, enterprises, businesses. Yeah. I always say my business partner, she's a Latin nut. She came up with it one day and I was like, it's perfect. And so it stuck. So
great. Well, hey, thanks for coming on today. Enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for having me. My pleasure. Truly.
Let's do it again.
Sounds good.
All right, Chuck.